The Alpha King saw a man hitting his pregnant wife. Seconds later, everything changed. His fist caught her across the mouth, and she stumbled sideways into a parked Toyota, her hands flying to her belly before they ever touched her split lip. The man grabbed her arm and yanked her upright like she weighed nothing, already cocking his other hand back for another shot. What happened in the next 45 minutes would become South Memphis legend, a story whispered about for decades in barbershops and corner stores and church parking lots across 3 counties. But we got to rewind just a little. Not far. Just enough so you understand who was watching. Marcus Cole was sitting in his black Escalade at the gas station on the corner of Shelby and 3rd, engine idling, window halfway down, finishing a phone call with his accountant. Marcus owned 14 properties in the neighborhood. He ran 2 laundromats, a detail shop and a soul food restaurant that had a 40-minute wait every Sunday after church. He employed over 60 people in a zip code. Most investors wouldn't drive through with their doors locked. People in South Memphis didn't call him a businessman. They called him the Alpha King, not because he gave himself the title, because he earned it. Every single day. For 15 years. Marcus was 44 years old, 6'3", 240 pounds, and he hadn't raised his voice in public in over a decade. He didn't need to. When Marcus Cole walked into a room, the room adjusted itself. Believe me. He ended his call, he looked up, and that's when he saw it. Across the lot, maybe 30 feet away, a man in a white tank top and baggy jeans had a woman by the wrist. She was young, maybe 22, 23, pregnant, clearly pregnant, 7, maybe 8 months along. And this guy was hitting her in the face with an open hand, right there in broad daylight, 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, like the whole world owed him permission. Marcus set his phone on the center console. He turned off the engine. He pulled the key out slow, dropped it in his pocket and opened his door. No rush, no rage on his face. Just purpose. The woman cried out again. The man shoved her against the car a second time, and her head snapped back against the window. A crack ran through the glass. Marcus closed his car door. He walked across the lot with his hands at his sides, his dress shoes clicking on the asphalt, each step measured and even. The gas station attendant inside saw him coming through the window and picked up the phone. Not to call the cops, to call his cousin. Because whatever was about to happen, people were going to want to hear about it. The man in the tank top didn't see Marcus coming. He was too busy screaming at the woman. "You think you can just take my car? You think you can just leave? Where you gonna go? Huh? Where?" He raised his hand again. Marcus caught it mid-swing, just wrapped his massive palm around the guy's wrist and stopped the motion dead in the air, the way you'd catch a door before it slammed. The guy's arm trembled but didn't move an inch. The man spun around. His name was Darnell Price, 26 years old, known around the neighborhood as a low-level hustler who talked too much and delivered too little. He had a temper that burned hot and a reputation for putting hands on women, though nobody had ever done anything about it because Darnell always picked targets who had no one to call. Darnell looked up into Marcus's face, and for the first time in maybe his entire adult life, the anger drained out of his expression and something else replaced it. Something cold and involuntary. "Fear. Let go of me, man," Darnell said. His voice cracked on the last word. Marcus didn't let go. He squeezed. Not enough to break anything. Just enough to make Darnell's knees buckle slightly. Just enough to let him know that the physics of this situation had changed completely. "You like hitting pregnant women?" Marcus said. His voice was low, conversational, almost friendly. That's what made it terrifying. Get this. Darnell could have apologized, could have backed down, could have done the math and realized that he was standing in front of the most respected man in a 10-mile radius with 100 witnesses forming a circle around them. He could have made the smart play. But Darnell Price had never made a smart play in his life. He snatched his wrist free. Marcus let him, and puffed up his chest. "Mind your business, old man. This is between me and my girl." Marcus looked past Darnell, looked at the woman. Her lip was bleeding. Her left eye was already swelling shut. She had one hand pressed flat against her belly and the other braced against the car, holding herself up. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering in the summer heat. "What's your name?" Marcus asked her. "Not Darnell. Her." She hesitated, looked at Darnell, then back at Marcus. "Keisha," she said, barely above a whisper. "Keisha, you want to be here right now?" She shook her head. Tears cut lines through the dust on her cheeks. Marcus stepped between Keisha and Darnell, physically placed his body in the gap. Darnell had to take a step back. "Then you're not here anymore," Marcus said to her. He pulled his phone from his pocket without looking at it, speed-dialed a number, and said, "Tanya, bring the van to the Shell on Shelby. Right now. I got a young lady needs a ride." He hung up, slid the phone back in his pocket. Darnell's face twisted. "Yo, who do you think you are? You can't just take my girl somewhere. She's carrying my baby." Here's what nobody tells you. In moments of confrontation, most people think the explosion is the dangerous part. It's not. The most dangerous moment is the quiet that comes right before someone makes a permanent decision. And Marcus was standing in that quiet right now, his jaw tight, his hands still at his sides, and a stillness in his body that made the growing crowd step back without realizing they were doing it. "Your baby," Marcus repeated. "Yeah, my baby, my woman, my business." Marcus took one step forward, just one. Darnell flinched backward too. "You're hitting the mother of your child," Marcus said, "in public, in the face, while she's carrying your blood inside her body. And you think that makes her yours?" Darnell's right hand drifted toward his waistband. 3 people in the crowd noticed. Marcus noticed too. His eyes tracked the hand without his head moving. "Go ahead," Marcus said. "Pull out whatever you got in your waistband. Let's see how that works out for you." Darnell's hand stopped. He looked around, counted the faces watching. At least 20 people now, and more coming. 2 guys from Marcus's detail shop had walked over, both of them built heavy, both standing about 10 feet behind Darnell with their arms crossed. They hadn't been called. They just knew. "I ain't got nothing," Darnell muttered. "Then take your hand off your waist." Darnell dropped his hand. "I swear this happened." What Marcus did next is the part people still talk about, the part that separated him from every other big man with money and muscle in that neighborhood. He didn't hit Darnell. He didn't threaten him again. He didn't posture. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He opened it, took out a business card and held it out to Darnell. "Come see me tomorrow," Marcus said. 9 a.m. at the laundromat on Crump. "I'll give you a job." The crowd went silent. Keisha stared. Darnell stared. Even the 2 guys from the detail shop exchanged a look. "What?" Darnell said. "You heard me. 9 a.m. I'll put you to work. $12 an hour to start. You show up on time, you do the work, you keep your hands to yourself, and in 6 months I'll bump you to 15. Darnell looked at the card, then at Marcus, then at the card again. "Why?" Darnell asked. Marcus put his wallet away. "Because I've been where you are. Broke, angry, taking it out on the only person who can't fight back. And somebody gave me a chance I didn't deserve. I'm giving you the same one, once. Now listen to me. That might sound like the turning point, like the moment the power shifted. It wasn't, not yet, because Darnell hadn't made his choice. And a moment isn't a turning point until someone chooses a direction they can't come back from. A white minivan pulled into the gas station lot. A woman in her 50s got out. Tanya, Marcus's restaurant manager. She'd been with him for 11 years and she moved with the kind of calm authority that comes from having handled 1,000 crises before lunch. She walked straight to Keisha, put an arm around her shoulders and guided her toward the van without a single word exchanged with Marcus. They'd done this before. Not this exact situation, but this kind. Marcus had a network. Women's shelters, church groups, emergency housing, and Tanya was the one who operated it day to day. Keisha looked back at Darnell as she walked to the van. There was something in her eyes that wasn't hatred, wasn't love either. It was exhaustion, The bone-deep kind that comes from hoping someone will change and watching them prove you wrong over and over until hope itself becomes the heaviest thing you carry. "Keisha, get back here," Darnell said. But his voice had no steel in it anymore. He sounded like a kid who dropped his ice cream and was yelling at the sidewalk about it. Keisha got in the van. Tanya closed the door. The van pulled away. And now it was just Marcus and Darnell, in the middle of a gas station parking lot with 24 witnesses and a decision hanging in the air. Darnell looked at the business card in his hand. He crumpled it, dropped it on the ground. "I don't need your charity, old man." Marcus watched the card hit the asphalt. He nodded, slowly. Then he bent down, picked it up, smoothed it out against his thigh, and held it out again. "That wasn't charity," Marcus said. "That was respect. I gave you enough to believe you could be better than what I just watched you do. Pick it up or walk away. But if you walk away, understand something." He leaned in close enough that only Darnell could hear him. "You will never put your hands on that girl again. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not ever. Because if you do, I won't offer you a job. I won't offer you a conversation. I will make sure you disappear from her life so completely that your child won't know your name. And I don't mean that the way you think I mean it. I mean lawyers. I mean restraining orders. I mean every resource I have pointed at you until you are legally a stranger to your own kid. You understand me?" You could see it in Darnell's body, the fight going out of him in stages. His shoulders dropped first, then his chest deflated, then his chin came down. He looked at the card Marcus was holding. He looked at the ground. He looked at the spot where the van had been. And then he did something nobody expected. His eyes got wet. His bottom lip trembled. And Darnell Price, the guy who 5 minutes ago was beating a pregnant woman in broad daylight, covered his face with both hands and started crying. Not performing, not stalling, crying. The kind that comes from somewhere so deep it surprises even the person it's coming out of. Marcus didn't move, didn't touch him, didn't speak. He just stood there, holding the business card, waiting. The crowd was uncomfortable. A few people shifted their weight. Someone in the back whispered something. One of the detail shop guys looked away. "Stay with me here, because this is where the story splits from every other confrontation you've ever seen on the internet. This is where Marcus Cole proved why they called him the Alpha King, and it had nothing to do with size or money or intimidation." After about 30 seconds, Darnell wiped his face with the back of his hand. He sniffed hard. He looked at Marcus with red eyes and a running nose and said, "My daddy used to beat my mama every night, every single night. I watched it from the hallway. I told myself I'd never be like him. I told myself that every day for 20 years. And look at me." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. The tension across his shoulders released just slightly, and he lowered the hand holding the card to his side. "I know," Marcus said. "I watched my father do the same thing." Darnell blinked. "For real?" "For real. Broke her jaw when I was 7. Cracked her ribs when I was 9. Put her in the hospital when I was 12. And when I was 16, I caught myself grabbing a girl by the arm during an argument and squeezing until she screamed. And I saw his face in the mirror behind her. That was the day I decided to learn how to be a different kind of man. It took me years. I'm still working on it. You're 26. You've still got time. But only if you decide. Right now. Today. No lie." The gas station parking lot on a Wednesday afternoon became a confessional. 2 men standing in the heat, one of them the most powerful man in the neighborhood, the other the weakest version of himself he'd ever been, and the distance between them was smaller than anyone watching could have guessed. Darnell reached out and took the card from Marcus's hand. He didn't say thank you. He didn't make a promise. He just took the card, put it in his pocket, and stood there. 9 mm, Marcus said. "Don't be late." Marcus turned and walked back toward his Escalade. The crowd parted. A few people nodded at him. One woman grabbed his arm as he passed and said, "God bless you, Marcus." He nodded at her but didn't stop. He got in his truck, started the engine, and before he pulled out, he called Tanya. "Where'd you take her?" "Covenant House on Lamar. She's got a bed, a meal, and an intake appointment in the morning." "She need anything?" "Prenatal vitamins. Her last checkup was 3 months ago. I already called Dr. Williams." "Good. Call me if she needs anything else." He hung up, pulled out of the gas station. Now you might think that's the end. Man intervenes, gives a speech, drives away, roll credits. But this is where the story gets real, because real life doesn't wrap up in a parking lot. And the thing about Marcus Cole is that he didn't just make grand gestures, he followed through. Every single time. Here's what happened next. 9 a.m. The following morning, Marcus was at the laundromat on Crump Boulevard. He'd been there since 7, same as every day, going over numbers, checking machines, talking to his morning manager. At 8:58, the front door opened. Darnell Price walked in, clean shirt, jeans without holes, hair brushed, eyes still a little red but clear. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure the floor would hold him. "You're early," Marcus said from behind the counter. He didn't look surprised. He looked ready. He'd already laid out a work shirt, a time card, and a laminated list of duties. You gotta understand, Marcus had done this before. Not just with Darnell. Over the past 15 years, he'd hired dozens of men and women who other people had written off. Former convicts, addicts, guys fresh off the corner, women coming out of shelters. His businesses weren't just businesses, they were second chances with a time clock. And the reason it worked, the reason his employee retention rate was higher than half the corporations in the city, was that Marcus didn't just give people a paycheck. He gave them structure, accountability, and the one thing most of them had never experienced in their lives, someone who expected them to be better and refused to accept anything less. True story. Darnell showed up the next day too, and the day after that, and the day after that. But let me be straight with you. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't a movie montage. The first week, Darnell was late twice. Marcus docked his pay both times. No lecture, just math. You show up late, you get paid less. Simple. Darnell wanted to argue the second time. He walked up to Marcus's office door with his chest puffed and his voice loud and said, "This is some bull, man." I was 5 minutes late. Marcus was sitting at his desk. He looked up, set down his pen. 5 minutes late yesterday was 5 minutes. 5 minutes late today is a pattern. You want to argue about it or you want to go fold shirts? Darnell stood in the doorway. His fists were balled, his jaw was working. Every instinct in his body was telling him to blow up, to flip a table, to be the version of himself that solved problems with volume and violence. But he didn't. He turned around. He walked to the folding station. He folded shirts for 4 hours without saying a word, and the next day he was on time. Week 2, Marcus put Darnell on customer service, front counter, face-to-face with people. This was deliberate. Marcus knew that the hardest thing for a man who'd spent his life controlling people through fear was learning to serve them with patience. Darnell hated it. A woman complained her clothes smelled like too much detergent. Darnell's neck tensed. His hands gripped the counter edge. Marcus watched from across the room without intervening. "I'm sorry about that, ma'am," Darnell said through his teeth. "Let me re-wash those for you. No charge." The woman left satisfied. Darnell exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 3 minutes. Marcus walked over, set a bottle of water on the counter in front of him and said, "That was harder than any fight you've ever been in. And you won. Mark my words. That was the moment. Not the gas station. Not the confrontation. This was the turning point. Because Darnell looked at that bottle of water, and then up at Marcus, and something in his face broke open. Not in the crying way, not in the weak way, but in the way a man looks when he realizes for the first time that strength and control are not the same thing. Meanwhile, Keisha was building her own path. Tanya had connected her with a caseworker at Covenant House. She'd gotten her prenatal care up to date. Dr. Williams said the baby was healthy. A girl. Keisha started attending a support group for women leaving abusive relationships, and within 3 weeks she was the one staying late to help new arrivals fill out paperwork. She didn't contact Darnell. He didn't contact her. Marcus had made it clear to both of them, separately, quietly, that any reconciliation would happen on Keisha's terms and timeline, or it wouldn't happen at all. Period. A month passed. Darnell hadn't missed a day of work since week 1. Marcus moved him from the laundromat to the detail shop, where the work was harder and the pay was better. Darnell was good with his hands. Turns out when you channel that energy into buffing a hood or polishing rims instead of swinging at someone, you can produce beautiful work. His manager told Marcus that Darnell had the best eye for detail on the crew. Now, here's where the story takes one more turn that nobody saw coming. 6 weeks after the gas station incident, Marcus got a call at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night. It was Tanya. Keisha's in labor. Early. She's at Regional 1. She's alone. Marcus was in bed. He sat up, pulled on clothes, drove to the hospital. Not because it was his responsibility, not because anyone expected him to, but because Marcus Cole understood something about power that most powerful men never figure out. Real authority isn't about what you do when people are watching. It's about what you do when no one would blame you for staying home. He got to the hospital, found Keisha's room. She was scared. Contractions were coming fast. The baby was 5 weeks early. A nurse was trying to keep her calm, but Keisha was alone in every way that mattered. No family in Memphis, no friends she trusted, and the father of her baby was someone she'd been told to stay away from. Marcus sat in the chair next to her bed. He didn't hold her hand, didn't make promises. He just said, "I'm here. You're not alone. And your daughter is going to be fine." Keisha grabbed his wrist and squeezed during the next contraction. He let her, didn't flinch. This is the part of the story where I need you to picture something. A man who built an empire in one of the toughest neighborhoods in America. A man whose name made grown men straighten up, and whose presence could silence a crowded room, sitting in a plastic hospital chair at midnight, letting a 22-year-old woman he'd known for 6 weeks crush his hand while she brought a life into the world. The baby came at 2:47 a.m., 4 pounds 11 ounces. Small but breathing on her own. The nurses put her on Keisha's chest and Keisha started sobbing, not from pain, but from the overwhelming collision of terror and joy and relief that every parent knows but no one can prepare for. Marcus stood up. He looked at the baby. He looked at Keisha. And he said, "She's perfect." Then he walked into the hallway, pulled out his phone, and made a call he'd been thinking about for 3 days. He called Darnell. "Your daughter was just born. 5 weeks early. She's small, but she's healthy. Keisha's okay." Silence on the other end. "You there?" Marcus asked. "Yeah." Darnell's voice was barely audible. Can I see her?" "Not tonight. Keisha needs rest. But I talked to her caseworker. If Keisha agrees, and only if Keisha agrees, you can come to the hospital tomorrow. Supervised. You sit in a chair, you hold your daughter, and you leave when you're told to leave. You understand?" "Yeah." "I understand. Darnell." "Yeah. You've been showing up every day. I see it. She's going to see it too. But it's going to take time. A lot of it. You ready for that?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm ready." Marcus hung up. He leaned against the hospital wall. For just a second his composure cracked. Not much, just a tightening around his eyes, a long exhale that carried more weight than any speech he'd given. 15 years of doing this, hundreds of people. Some made it, some didn't. And every single time he carried the risk that this one would be the story that ended badly, that the man he gave a chance to would go home and prove every cynic right. But he pushed off that wall, straightened his collar, and walked back into the room to check on Keisha one more time before he left. The next afternoon, Darnell came to the hospital. Tanya was there, a social worker was there, Marcus was there. Keisha had agreed, reluctantly, nervously, but she'd agreed. Darnell walked into the room and stopped. He looked at Keisha. She looked back at him. No words. The history between them filled the space like furniture. You couldn't move through the room without bumping into it. The nurse brought the baby over, placed her in Darnell's arms. And this man who 6 weeks ago was throwing punches at a pregnant woman in a gas station parking lot, held his daughter with hands that were suddenly the gentlest things in the building. His lips pressed together. His chin trembled. He looked down at that tiny face and said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He wasn't talking to the baby. He was talking to Keisha, but he couldn't look at her when he said it. "I know," Keisha said. Nothing else. No acceptance, no forgiveness, no promise. Just acknowledgement. It was enough for now. Darnell held his daughter for 12 minutes. The social worker timed it. When they told him it was time to go, he handed the baby back to the nurse, nodded at Keisha, and walked out of the room. Marcus followed him into the hallway. Darnell stopped at the elevator. He was breathing hard. His eyes were wet again. He turned to Marcus and said, "How do I not become my father?" And Marcus said the line. 7 words, no explanation after. Just 7 words that landed in that hospital hallway and never left. You already started. Now don't stop. If this story moved something inside you, if it reminded you that real strength has nothing to do with fists, hit that subscribe button right now. Because I tell stories like this every week. Stories about people who chose to be different when every force in their life was pulling them toward the same. 1 click. That's it. Now let me finish this. 3 months later. Darnell was working full-time at the detail shop. He'd been promoted to shift lead. He was attending a weekly anger management group that Marcus had connected him with through his church network. He and Keisha weren't back together. They might never be. But they had a CO parenting arrangement mediated by the social worker, and Darnell saw his daughter. They named her Amara, which means grace, 3 times a week. Keisha had moved into transitional housing. She'd gotten her GED through a program at Covenant House and was enrolled in a medical assistant certification course. Tanya had become something between a mentor and a surrogate mother to her, calling her every morning at 7 to make sure she was up and every night at 10 to make sure she wasn't spiraling. And Marcus? Marcus went back to doing what he always did. Opened his businesses at 7, closed them at 7, took calls at midnight when someone needed something, showed up at hospitals and courthouses and school board meetings and parole hearings, built his corner of the world 1 person at a time, 1 day at a time, with the patience of a man who understood that real change is slow and unglamorous and mostly invisible. But here's the thing about that day at the gas station. The thing that turned it into legend. It wasn't the confrontation. It wasn't Marcus catching Darnell's fist. It wasn't even the job offer, though that's the detail most people remember when they tell the story. It was the business card. The one Darnell crumpled and dropped on the ground. The one Marcus bent down and picked up, smoothed out, and offered a second time. That's the image that stuck. That's the moment people describe when they talk about Marcus Cole and why he was different from every other big man who ever ran a block. Because anyone can knock a bully down. Anyone can flex authority. But picking up a crumpled business card from dirty asphalt and offering it again to a man who just disrespected you, that requires something most people don't have. It requires believing that people can change, even when they've just shown you the worst version of themselves. It requires a kind of power that doesn't come from size or money or reputation. It comes from having been broken yourself and choosing to rebuild. Every day, no matter what. People in South Memphis still tell this story. The details shift depending on who's telling it. Some versions have Marcus throwing a punch. He didn't. Some versions have Darnell pulling a weapon. He didn't. Some versions have them becoming best friends. They didn't. The truth is messier and quieter and more powerful than any exaggerated version. The truth is that on a hot Wednesday afternoon at a gas station on Shelby and 3rd, a man saw something terrible happening and decided to do something about it. Not with violence, not with a lecture, with a business card and a willingness to follow through. Darnell Price isn't a perfect man. He's still in anger management. He still has days where the old wiring fires up and his hands want to become fists and his voice wants to become a weapon. But he has a daughter named Amara who reaches for him when he walks into the room And he has a job where people count on him. And he has a phone number he can call at any hour when the darkness gets loud. Marcus Cole's number. The Alpha King. The man who saw a stranger hitting his pregnant wife at a gas station and changed the trajectory of 3 lives in under an hour. Not with power, with presence. Not with force, with a second chance nobody asked for and everybody needed. That's the legend. That's the story they tell on the corner of Shelby and 3rd. And now you know it too.